Hi everybody and welcome back. In today's video I'll be talking about what you should look for when you buy a used snowblower. Take this blower here for example. It looks in good condition. It is in good condition actually. Well, the body is at least. The metal's still solid. It's not rusted too bad. But I'll start up the engine and have a listen to it and you'll see what I mean. So you can hear that knock in that engine, so that's a big no-no. If you look at a blower started up, if you hear bad noises like this, don't buy it. The repair could end up costing you more than just buying a used snowblower. When you hear knocking like that, it could be that the connecting rod is loose on the crankshaft. You may buy it and not notice the knocking if you're not too mechanically inclined. You may use it for a little while, then the engine's going to blow on you, and it's not going to be worth repairing. And here's another MTD snowblower here. The engine runs really good on this one. It's got no knocks whatsoever. But if you look at the body, it doesn't look in too good a shape. It's really rusted. And if you look inside the shell, it's just rotted. So you definitely want to watch for this, especially on snowblowers with thinner metal. It does tend to rust a bit quicker. Also, if you look at a snowblower, it's not rotted at the bottom like I showed you. But when you grab the top over here, you can twist it. Like this, as you can see. That's not good as well because it's just about to fall apart. And here's another good look. Sometimes what happens is it rots over here, inside here, especially over here where it bolts to the back end of the blower. You want to look for cracks over here. They're just going to be hairline cracks sometimes, but it's enough to cause issues. What often happens with this type of blower is that it rots, and then when you go to blow your snow, this part here moves from the back end and it makes the auger belts come off the pulleys. I've seen this happen many times. The belts come off, they break, the owner brings it in to put a new set of belts instead of repairing the front end, and then they end up with the same problem. So the only fix for that is to replace the whole front end. If this is damaged at the back here, all cracked or whatever, which I've seen before, then you have to replace the whole back end. So if you see these problems when you're looking at buying a snowblower, just stay away from it. Also, when you look at the auger housing, you want to make sure that the metal is still intact on the sides here where the skid shoes bolt on. Make sure it's not all rusted, broken to the point that you cannot bolt these back on. But if you have a MIG welder at home, you can always weld the hairline cracks or the cracks that are here. But if it's rotted right through, then you pretty well have to replace the shell. So depending on your mechanical abilities, it may still be worth it for you. However, if you're buying it for parts, it doesn't matter as long as you know it's not going to last. Because sometimes you do have a lot of good parts, like this snowblower here. The engine is good. There are parts at the front part of it that are still good, like the auger, the chute, the tires, the transmission. So you can get your money back if you have the same blower at home to use for parts. Also, if you see the fuel lines and the clamps corroded like this, that means that they're going to need to be replaced very soon. Now, another thing to watch for when you buy a snowblower is if you go to look at it and the thing's been sitting outside in the rain all summer, just beware. I know the guy who bought this snowblower, and that was the case with this one. It was advertised as mint condition. When the guy got there, the thing wouldn't start, the pull cord was all frayed, and you couldn't even move the gear shifter here because it had been sitting outside all summer, and the shaft inside the transmission was all rusted, so it couldn't move. And the carburetor and the fuel tank were full of water, literally, so that's why the thing wouldn't run right. Not only was it not in mint condition, but it had been neglected. They had actually replaced the shear pins with actual bolts, so that tells you that they hit something somewhere down the line in the past, so you just never know what it's going to be like inside the gearbox. The point I'm getting at is if you buy something that's been neglected, even though it's advertised as mint condition, is you're more than likely going to end up spending money to get it repaired. Although this blower is in good condition, when you go to look at a unit like this, do not pay full price. Always keep in mind what it may cost to get it repaired. If it's not running perfect, then don't assume it's in mint condition. So this is a classic example that if a blower's been sitting outside, just beware. Now for some people it's important to have an electric starter on their snowblower, so you want to make sure that one is actually installed on the blower you're looking at buying. This is how you can tell. There's a plug here and a switch. On some newer blowers, the plug for the electric starter may be on the side of the engine over here somewhere. And you can see the electric starter over here. Now you might want to bring yourself a cord like this to try out the electric starter on the blower you're looking at buying. The reason for that is if you did need to replace the starter on the blower you're looking at, it can be pretty expensive. It can cost between $150 to $200 for a brand new starter here in Canada. First of all, you want to make sure it does spin over. And the second thing is you want to make sure it spins over fast enough to start the snowblower. Sometimes a defective starter will turn the engine, but not fast enough to start it. So in this case, I'll just show you how quick it should turn. As you saw there, it started right away. The motor spinned pretty quick. I've also seen starters where they would start the engine, then when you go a second time, depending on where the starter motor stopped, it may or may not start up again. So check that out. If it spins too slow, you know you might have to replace the starter. If it smells burnt, that's another sign as well. And like I said, if the starter only works sporadically, it could be that the switch is bad or that the armature inside the starter is burnt. Another thing you want to check for is excessive play in the bushings here at the end of the auger shaft. You're actually going to have a bit of play here from the auger to the shaft, just like this, because the augers just slide over the shaft. But the play I'm talking about is between the shaft and the bushing, which is attached here to the auger housing. So this one's pretty good. And then you want to check both sides as well. And it's good here. If the play is really excessive, it can cause things to get out of alignment. It can cause the augers to be rubbing on the auger shell. And in some cases, it can also cause the impeller to be rubbing on it as well. You would also want to check for excessive play in the wheel bushings as well. Oftentimes you can check these really quickly just by grabbing the handlebars on the snowblower and moving it up and down like this. In this case, they're nice and tight. You don't hear any clunking or anything like that. But if the blower was moving from one side to the other, it could well be that the bushings are worn out. You want to make sure that it's not moving because of the front end being on an uneven surface. So when you move it up and down, just pay close attention down here to see if it moves up and down. Another way to check it is if you have the blower up like this, you can grab the wheel, move it up and down, and if the play is excessive, then you know they're worn out. In some cases, you're always going to have a bit of play. It's normal, so don't get too alarmed over that. If the bushings are extremely worn out, though, it can cause the transmission to slip. In some cases, I've even seen snowblowers that have chains inside the transmission, and the chains kept coming off because everything was out of alignment. By the way, bushings are not expensive, and I do have videos that show how to replace them. So again, when you go look at a used snowblower, don't be too picky. Remember that you're not paying full price, and don't expect something brand new either. Another thing you may want to check when you buy a snowblower are the tires. If you have tires like this, you're not going to have much traction unless you have chains on them. These tires here have good grip. You don't need chains on these. You also want to make sure the tires aren't all cracked. If they're cracked a little bit, that's okay, but if they're really split and you can see the tube or air is coming out of them, then you know you're going to have to replace the tires, and these tires are not cheap. If you have to pay somebody to do it, it's going to cost a little bit more than if you did it yourself. Now when you look at a blower, if you can fix a lot of it yourself, then you're saving a lot of money. But keep in mind that if you can't, it's going to cost you substantially more. Also, when you look at a blower, you want to make sure that the wheels are not jammed on the shaft. It may not be a big deal, but if you do need to get work done on it, it's going to cost you a lot more money, because sometimes these wheels are very hard to get off the shaft. Sometimes you end up sacrificing the wheel just to get it off. And if a mechanic can get them off for you without breaking it, it's going to cost a lot more, because you have to consider all the acetylene gas that's been used to heat that up. Now when you buy a snowblower, it's always better if you can try it out in the winter time when there's actually snow that you can blow. But if there isn't any, you can always make sure that the augers turn properly. Sometimes it's better to try them out in the snow, because if there's something wrong inside the auger box, it may spin freely if there's no load on it, but as soon as you go into snow, the augers might stop. And that can all be caused by a damaged gearbox worn out belts or pulleys or different things like that. I also like to test the transmission by starting it up, holding the snowblower, and making the wheels spin on the ground. I'll just do a quick demonstration of that to show you how it's done. When you see the wheels spin on the ground when you're holding the snowblower as I did, that tells you that the transmission, the belts, and everything are in good condition. If the wheels stop turning as soon as you put any resistance on them, it could be that the drive disc is worn out or the drive belt is worn out. Another important thing you want to look out for is that the parts for the snowblower or the engine on it are not obsolete. By the way, this is a Tecumseh overhead valve engine, and some of the parts are actually obsolete on this engine here, and I can't get the parts anymore to fix it. You can still get a lot of parts for Tecumseh engines, but just beware. If you're not sure of the part, or if you buy a blower that's not running and it needs a part, you can always check first to make sure that the part is available. With really old snowblowers, the parts can really be hard to get sometimes. Also, you may want to buy a blower that's big enough for what you want to do. This one here may be too small. It's only good for small driveways. This one's a lot bigger. It's much heavier, and a lot of people don't like big blowers like that. It's 33 inches wide, and this one's 29. I find a blower that measures between 28 to 29 inches is perfect. Although this video is to mechanically show you what to look for when buying a used snowblower, I'm actually showing you the sizes because oftentimes people buy a snowblower that is much smaller than what they actually need. And what happens, for example, if they buy a little blower like this and they do a big driveway, they can end up breaking it, or it's going to wear out prematurely. And with a big blower, people find that it's too heavy for them and they can't use it. So they're no further ahead that way either. One important factor to keep in mind when you're looking at buying a used snowblower is don't expect a brand new snowblower for half the price of a new one or less. That's why people are selling them in used condition for less money, because they're not new. I get a lot of people that look at snowblowers and they expect a brand new machine with no defects, even though they're paying a lot less than the brand new one. Anytime you buy anything used, you can always expect that at some point it's going to need a repair. Even brand new machines end up needing repairs some of the time. But if you go with a bit of education as to what to look for, you can save yourself a lot of money. Sometimes you can end up getting a better deal because of it, or end up not buying something that's going to be a money pit. Hopefully this video helped you guys out. If you have any comments or what else to look for when buying a snowblower, please leave your comment under this video. I may have forgotten a few things, so your comments are always appreciated. Thanks for watching, guys, and make sure to subscribe to save yourself a lot of money. Take care.